Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asarimhotep with the Mado Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture and the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. Today is Sunday, July the 11th, 2021. And our discussion is going to be about the Kimoyo Cosmogram, or iconograph that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. And so many of you know that I have adopted the term Kimoyo from the Kikongo language to substitute for the phrase African spirituality. And so I've already done a show on that, and so you can find it in the archives on this channel. So in continuation of that conversation, I've created a cosmogram to represent that concept, the fundamentals of the concept of Kimoyo. So that's what we're going to discuss today. This is a multi-part discussion. So this is the introduction, or lesson one. So all of that and more when we return in just a second. Peace and blessings, everyone, and welcome back. It's been a minute since I've had a live discussion with each and every one of you, so I'm blessed to have you, those who are checking us out live, and then, of course, mad love to all of you who are checking out the archive, because you are out there in the world on your purpose, and you just couldn't make it to the live today, but we still got love for you and all that good stuff. So want to give a shout out to everyone who is made themselves known in the chat thus far. Peace and blessings to Sister Tamika and Brother Chavez and Brother Teti Usamaak Ross, Saneferu and Octo Thorpe. And then those of you who are listening live on the multitasking here. Those of you who are catching the live via both the Harold Johnson and the asarimhotep Facebook pages. And so y'all chats don't necessarily come in behind the scenes here, but peace and blessings to you. Peace and blessings to Ali Dawood, Sundiata, Atta, and Zombie. Thank you all. And those of you who are listening but haven't made yourself known in the chats, just want to say love and light to each and every one of you, and thank you for joining. As I stated before, this is the first in a series of conversations on the concept of Kimoyo, and we'll get into a brief refresher of what that is in a little bit. But it's not just a conversation about Kimoyo. It is about the iconography that is in development to represent some of the major concepts that are significant within this larger discussion of Kimoyo. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have substituted the word Kimoyo for the phrase African spirituality. And the reason that I did this, well, there's multiple reasons, but one, I wanted to find an indigenous term that more so encapsulated the deeper aspects of the phenomena of African spirituality. Because I don't think the phrase African spirituality really gets at the heart of what the Africans are doing. And this is based on my over 20 years of deep study of African religion, African languages, African culture and history, and with some initiations and conversations with elders, there are common themes that I'm seeing that dominate the African landscape when it comes to quote unquote spirituality. And so the idea of African spirituality itself can, and I'm a scientist, so I don't like to speak in absolutes. So the concept African spirituality is very hard to define. And that is because of the historical issues. Because the concept of Africa is not an African concept. It is a label that was imposed upon African people, and it also set the boundaries for what is Africa and what is not Africa. And so you have certain scholars, for example, Sheikh Anta Diop, Runoko Rashidi, Wesley Muhammad, and a few others who make the argument that Arabia is Africa, is Africa's northeast extension. Well, this causes a fundamental conflict of concepts for those who believe that the spiritual traditions that originate in Arabia or in the Levant or in southern Mesopotamia, that those are not African religions. Well, for those that believe that that area is also Africa and not Western Asia or Europe, then all of those are African religions. And so when people think of African religions, they're mainly thinking of the concepts that you'll find, for example, among the Akan, among the Yoruba, among the Congo, among groups in Kenya like the Kalenjin or the Maasai, et cetera, the Zulu or things of that nature. So that in itself can be biased. And so, how do you resolve this conflict? So you have to come up with a term that describes the majority of African systems. And that's what Kimoyo is. It is a word and phrase that discusses the dominant, not all, because you can never say all. I haven't studied all the hundreds of thousands of groups that exist on the continent of Africa. But I've studied enough to know the common patterns that exist in all corners of the continent, including ancient Kemet. So that's what, Kimoyo kind of references. And it also leaves room for other types of African spiritual traditions that don't necessarily or neatly fall into Kimoyo. So with that being said, before I move forward, I want to let y'all know, for those who are listening live, that today's show is one of two. At 7 p.m. Eastern time, I'm going to interview Brother Lamar and Brother Dewey from the Comics Cube podcast. And our subject is diversity in comics and the art of storytelling. So I am starting a new segment on this channel on the Mbongi called Afro Madu. And Madu being the word like Medu in ancient Egyptian, which was borrowed into Greek, which became the word myth. And so we're going to talk about African myths. So it's going to be dealing with Black Black comic book creators, Black sci-fi and Afrofuturism, and things of that nature. So the first episode is going to interview these good brothers. Dewey is actually Filipino, and of course, Brother Lamar is African American. And I was on their podcast in February. So with their permission, I uploaded our interview on the channel, and it premiered on Friday. So you can go to their channel on Comics Cube, or you can see that episode, on my channel. It was the last video that premiered on Friday. So that discussion is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So, and again, the Kimoyo iconograph, which we'll discuss today, I have made t-shirts. And so I have a whole line that I call Rude Boy Juju. And so you'll find different types of shirts and designs. And so the Spreadshirt link you will see in the description. Here's the one for the African American totem. I've renamed us the Bayankole, or the Bayankola. And so I have a whole conversation about that. As a matter of fact, I have, a shirt here that you can see. I can't see myself. So you can see that's the one that you saw on the screen. And of course, Kimoyo. And they have them for the women and the brothers as well. And I'm wearing the Bukanda shirt right now. And so, I renamed the continent Bukanda. And so you can get all of this and more, even the Mbongi shirts and logos. And if you want to support the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology, that is there too. And so I think that's it for the announcements. But before we get into today's lesson, make sure that you yes, I am striving to get to 10,000 subscribers. So if you have not subscribed to this channel, make sure that you subscribe so that you can get all of the notices and all the good stuff that comes along with this channel, all the good interviews and conversations that we have here. And make sure that you like this episode so we can be very disrespectful to the YouTube algorithm. So with that said, I am going to first peace to Brother Hassan all the way out in the UK. Peace to Sean, Polidore, and peace to Sister Monica Lamb in the building. And I am King Sosa and Sister Balquis. I don't know how you pronounce that first name. You're going to have to send me an audio of how you pronounce that first name, because I will definitely disrespect the pronunciation of that name. Peace to Sean P in the building as well. So I am going to share my screen and we will get started. So I won't be able to see what's going on in the chat, So if you have specific questions for me, I would hold off until the end of the program. That way I can see your questions and things. So hopefully y'all see everything on the screen and we are good to go. So as I mentioned earlier, this is lesson 1 in the initiation into Kimoyo. The other lessons, however, are going to be exclusive to the members of Patreon. So make sure that you join the patreon.com/asarimhotep and get the deeper lessons than what is going to be discussed in this intro today. So yes, initiation into Kimoyo Iconography, lesson 1. And as I mentioned, the Patreon will have the other lessons. And so there'll be a second episode or a lesson coming, I think this Friday. I think I'll have it done by Friday. I'll do it on Thursday. So as I mentioned before, Kimoyo is a name that comes out of the Congo. I got it from reading a few of the late Dr. Fukiao, Kimbwandende Kiabonseki Fukiao out of the Congo. And I have had the opportunity before he passed to have a number of conversations with him. Unfortunately, because of where I lived, I never had the opportunity to meet him in person, but we used to correspond all the time via email, and we would talk on the phone. And so this concept of Kimoyo was a part of that conversation. And so I decided to use this term as a substitution for, in general, African spirituality, but a specific type. It's not just a clean substitute. It represents some fundamental concepts. And y'all know that, and I will discuss that what the main criterion to be considered Kimoyo is in another conversation, and that won't be in Patreon. I'll just have that on the open YouTube. But as you know, also a software developer, computer scientist, and even a graphic designer, you know, I always have to come up with logos and concepts and visual concepts for these ideological concepts that I bring forth. So there's actually 3, and I'm saving the 3rd icon for a later date, but these 2 are 2 of 3 thus far iconographs for the concept of Kimoyo. And as you can see on the left-hand side, it's really just the infinity sign. But on each of the inner loops, there is a negative sign. Well, there's a sign in each. And on the left-hand side is the negative side, and the right-hand side is the plus side. On the right is another concept that fundamentally represents another key aspect of Kimoyo, and this will be explained in another video, and probably for those who are Patreon members. And so I won't have time to go into the deeper aspects of what the right icon means. but it is fundamentally related to what you see here on the left. And hopefully my mouse shows up on screen when I make it show up or whatnot. So y'all just don't see, I just don't seem like I'm just randomly talking in midair. But this is a, this is a key concept, and you'll see a common theme in the icons that I create regarding this concept of Kimoyo and African spirituality. So this is something that African people just do, and the world over. But this is real key amongst African people. And what you see on the screen right now is the Adikra, or the soul symbols of the king for the Akan people and the Ashanti in modern day Ghana, West Africa. And so there are dozens upon dozens of these iconographs amongst the Akan, and each one of the symbols has a name or a phrase associated with it, but also a teaching. So for example, this symbol that you see here on the right is Asase Yeduru, or Yesase Yeduru. The earth has weight. And this symbol represents the importance of the earth in sustaining life. It is a symbol of the providence and the divinity of Mother Earth. And so, especially in African languages, words for weight are also words for important. Words for heavy and important are the same. You find the same in Bantu, Sumerian, the like. They use the same words. So just wanted to get y'all familiar with certain icons of different African groups. So for example, here's another famous one, the Dogon womb of all world signs. And for those who are familiar with the Dogon of Mali and Burkina Faso and that area, matter of fact, the Akan, the Dagara, the Mandinka, and the Dogon are related peoples and have kind of a similar system. But they have all kinds of signs, and I would really recommend the book The Pale Fox for those of you who want to know more about the Dogon and to see their actual iconography. So this is one of their major iconographies, which is kind of a oval circle type shape, which represents God, whose name is Ama, and which is broken down into 4 demarcations, which represents the 4 elements, and their Dogon names on the outside representing these concepts: Yala, fire; Tonu, earth, etc., etc. And so that word Tonu, earth, in Dagari, in amongst the Dogon, in the Dagara language is Tingin, a Tingin. And so, and in ancient Egyptian, it is what we say Ta, but it's not Tas, or like Ted. But so this is just one iconograph representing the god Amma, which is the totality of all things. It's everything and all things at once. Existence is God. And they say that specifically in the text. And so here goes another related group, the Songhai people, out of Mali. And there's a book written by Dr. How I forget his name so fast. It's Hassan. I forgot it, but it has to deal with the oral traditions of the Songhai, balancing oral and written traditions among the Songhai. And the author is actually a prince, from the line of the kings and princes of Timbuktu, the late Timbuktu. And so he wrote a book, and there's a section of the book where he's talking about Songhai writing and Songhai iconographs. And you see a similar thing to what you see amongst the Dogon. And as I said, the Dogon, the Dagara people, the Akan, the Ashanti, the Mandinka, and the Songhai, they're all related peoples. And so, they travel, they get initiated into each other's systems, and certain things are shared and invented, or just this plain common amongst them. And so this is just one of the things that you see, among them. So this is a whole lecture unto itself. And then, of course, y'all should be familiar with ancient Kemet and the writing systems that you find there, and all of their concepts, And so this is the Sesh Meter Netcher, which is the writing script of ancient Kemet. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff that means a whole bunch of stuff amongst that. That's a series of lessons unto itself. So with that in mind, I've come up with this concept called African thinking cap. So, when we're, especially for those of us who are the diasporic Africans, when we're trying to come up with solutions, and these solutions are grounded in the traditions of our African ancestors, I say that in order to do that, you must put on your African thinking cap. And CAP is an acronym that I created called Creative Application of African Philosophy. So how do we creatively apply the fundamentals of the various African groups from which those of us in the diaspora descend, and that we create our own, built on our ancestral foundation and tradition, but making something that is uniquely ours. And so that's what the African thinking cap is. It is just a way to and consume, particular problems. And so one of the problems that we face in the diaspora collectively is developing a viable and powerful culture. And so when we're talking about culture, you have to understand it with its fundamental elements. And so for those who have ever taken Africana studies, everyone usually starts off with a text, an intro to Africana studies, or African studies, or African, I think it's African American studies, a text that was written by Dr. Malana Karenga. And so in that text, he talks about, the 7 core areas of culture, and that is history, that is a people's mythology and cosmology, their motifs, that means their visual icons and representations, as well as their other aesthetics in terms of music, dance, and things of that nature. Their ethos, which has to deal with their values, their political organization, their social organization, and their economic organization. So all of these in tandem, are the foundations or the essential elements of one's culture. And so in putting on my African thinking cap, my creative application of African philosophy, I looked into the area of motifs. How can we in the diaspora, create our own motifs that encapsulate the deep aspects of our developing philosophies and our solid foundational philosophies that are grounded in the continent of Africa itself? And so if I don't even know if I have this video up on my channel, or even if I even did take a video of this, but I presented a few years ago at a Sheikh Anta Diop conference. I initiated the conversation on an African American project, and to set up even a contest, if you will, for developing African American as a kind of a kickoff signs and symbols like the adinkras that we find amongst the Akan and Ashanti in Ghana, or just other areas as well. And so the signs, I gave the names of the signs that we would develop, called Busongi. And Busongi is a Chiluba Bantu word, and the Chiluba people live in the Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa. Busongi represents the African American Adinkra, so to speak, or the signs and symbols that encapsulate the deep and rich philosophy of the people. And so it is a combination of two separate words. And so y'all should be familiar, for those who are familiar with me, should already be familiar with the concept of paronymy. And that is the belief that two words that sound alike necessarily must be related. And it is paronymy for how a lot of African motifs and African philosophy is developed based on the similarity in the pronunciation of certain words, even though they may have different etymologies. So these are two separate words, but they are being combined to create a larger, more fundamental concept, which I call Busongi. And so there's the root songa, which means to excite, to stimulate, and to provoke. And so signs and symbols are used to excite the mind, to speak to the spirit and the soul of the person, but more importantly, to provoke one to action. And so that's fundamentally the goal of the signs, to provoke one into action and to stimulate thought, to excite one's psyche. And, you know, a derivative of that word is luinsonge, which means excitation or instigation. And then there's the other root songa, which means to cut to a point, pruning, sharpening, sculpture, to make a sculpture or carving. And so busongi is a word meaning sculpture. And so for us, busongi is not only any kind of artwork that we create, it also includes the signs and symbols that we create that are used to provoke or to excite and stimulate, to stimulate the psyche, and to provoke thought and to provoke action, and especially to remind us of our character in things of this nature. So, and you know that all words for writing derive from roots meaning to carve or to cut or to slice. Even the word write in English derives from a word meaning to cut. And so this is what it is. So when you see those Kimoyo icons, they're, you know, we call them, you know, they are hieroglyphs in the Busongi. So these are Busongi glyphs. And so y'all were introduced to one of the glyphs already for the renaming of African Americans, which I call the Bayankole, the Bayankola, meaning the eminent and powerful people. And so this totem here, this icon is called Ntangu or Ntangwa, which is just a word for sun in the Kikongo language. And is cognate with the word Aten in the ancient Egyptian, and even Ra, believe it or not. And so you can see that there is the sun is represented by the spiral that is going counterclockwise, and I've done a whole lesson on this, so you can go back to the archives and get the full lesson. But that's the totem that I designed for African Americans, representing, you know, us as a people. And so here's another one that I came up with, called Egbenu Ogu Okukwo, which is an Igbo phrase, which stands for basically a warrior scholar. And there's a phrase. So remember that all the icons come with phrases and proverbs with them. And so you have this at the bottom: Ibunu ji isi eje ogu. Ram uses head to go fight war. The English translation would be a brave ram who fights with his head. So that's what a warrior scholar is: a brave ram who fights with his head. And it means to fight fearlessly with both courage and intellect. And so this is the icon that was created, you know, for that, to represent that particular concept. And notice also as well the spiral, and we'll get more into that. That's going to be significant. And then, of course, there's my books. I have a book series called Alluja, but Alluja also comes with an icon. And as you can see in the center, it is the spiral going counterclockwise. And, you know, this is significant. And then this one here is what I call the African American Adinkra symbol, or the Busongi symbol, titled Dual Citizenship. And so basically these are just the ancient Egyptian icon for star and the word for land. And you can find this is a common way of representing these things even across Africa. But the symbol represents the knowing and fulfilling of our responsibilities as children of the earth and children of the stars. We assume our responsibility as children of the earth by taking out the lesser hunger without going beyond the boundaries that define the appetites on earth. We assume our responsibilities as children of eternity by looking for the ways to take out the greater hunger. Therefore, a search for wisdom. It is in satisfying the two hungers, the greater and lesser hunger, that we reach the state of perfection, meaning the fulfillment of our purpose. And so, again, you will see commonly this spiraling motion that is encapsulated in the iconography. So even when you go back to the icon, notice here in this icon symbol, Owia Kokroko, which means greatness of the sun. Underneath it says symbolizes vitality and renewal. And you can even see the spiral amongst them. And then their little, I guess, to represent rays or whatnot. But their spiral is going clockwise. But ours is going counterclockwise for a reason. But you can see, like, it's in the same tradition of what you find here in Ghana, because of course a lot of us come from Ghana, and then you'll see these ideas coming out of the Congo, and then of course we brought these things here to the Americas with us. And so when you read texts like, you know, Africanisms in American culture, you know, you'll see the fundamental ideas and iconography brought here to the United States by those enslaved Africans. So with that said, you know, we always, what we're developing is, or in this discussion, encapsulating the fundamental African worldview. And in this text, Writing African History, Daniel McCall says, Africanizing history must begin with a holistic attempt to understand the total worldview and cosmology of African peoples. For without it, looking at their oral history in the total context of their thought, we cannot understand the meaning of that history has for them and why they have preserved it. So we must look at the total worldview and the cosmology. So the symbol that we're going to be discussing today represents that worldview, that dominant worldview on the continent of Africa, as well as the cosmology. Excuse me. And I mentioned Foucault earlier. This is his text, African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo. And in it, he says, understanding the worldview of a people is the cornerstone for understanding their culture. And so we always want to start off with that. And so, again, here's another representation of Kimoyo. And so, again, it is just basically the infinity sign, which on the left-hand side has the negative sign, and on the right-hand side has the positive sign. And we'll get into the details of fundamentally what this means. And so here's another variation of it. You know, the lines are a little thinner, and there's a stylistic break, you know, here, but it's all the same. And so here is another representation of Kimoyo. And what you'll see here is kind of a combination of different ideas that fundamentally represent the same thing. So for those of you who are familiar with the Ifa tradition, you know that when they mark the Odus, when we mark Odus, we put 4 vertical strokes in. And so on one side, if we just have one column of 4 vertical strokes, it represents basically on. It's a binary system. And if we have 2, it represents off. But in some African traditions that have a similar tradition, the icons are left. And so for us, I wanted to represent ours from left to right, more so her. Horizontal lines than vertical. Binary system. So an infinite system of binaries in key fundamental areas of life. And so here's another one that I came up with. So, you know, this is the classical icon of, you know, the quantum world or the atoms. And so this is the atoms. So this is the side of the atoms. But this here is a representation of the sun. And so this is supposed to represent matter, light, and things of that nature. And so so again, but it's still a binary in terms of the in 2 regions of existence, in terms of quantum and in terms of the world or the universe in which we understand it today. Hold on. And okay. And so I pulled it up on the phone, and y'all said that I went out. And let me see. Can y'all hear me now? If y'all can hear me now. Say yes. And you hear me now? Okay, they're saying I'm going in and out. I don't know what the issue is. My signal is connected. I'm not moving anything. Let me see. What was the last thing that y'all heard clearly? So y'all saying all the way from the beginning. So well, hopefully it won't be too bad moving forward. But thank you all. Thank you all. Alrighty. So I'll just go back. So as I was stating in the beginning, like this is the fundamental symbol for Kimoyo that I created. It's just the infinity sign, and in many respects, it represents a binary foundation to existence in the universe and the cosmos and all of that good stuff, as I like to say. And so on the left-hand side, negative, on the right-hand side, positive. And there's another representation of the symbol, and this is the same concept, just using different symbols. So on the right hand side is positive, on the left hand side is negative. And for those who are familiar with the Ifa tradition, you know that 4 vertical strokes in a single column represents on or light, and then 4 strokes in a single column that is doubled represents off or no light. But for us, we're going to make our strokes horizontal. And so that's what it's going to be for us. But it's going to represent the fundamental binary nature of existence. And what and it can represent anything that we can do in binary form. So it doesn't necessarily have to be off and on like we do in computer science when it comes to electricity. And so and this is another one that I came up with, and this is the on the left hand side representing the quantum world, and on the right hand side representing the world of matter and large objects and things of that nature. And so this is the interaction between the two binaries. And so I'm seeing in the chat that says that would be nice on a t-shirt. All of these are on a t-shirt, and you can get them on my Spreadshirt page. So the link is in the description. So, if you would like these on a shirt, and they're men and women, you can even get them on a coffee mug if you want, and sweatshirts and stuff like that. And the winter's coming up soon. All of these you can find there. So let's continue. And so what is Kimoyo? Kimoyo is defined by me as the art of adding life to life, or the art of vitality and prosperity, of making things to flourish in all areas of life. And the word moyo itself is a word for the heart. It's a technical word, historical word for the heart. But in African languages, the word for heart also stands for the mind. It also stands for breath, and it also stands for life and spirit. And the key is a prefix standing for, it's a noun class prefix meaning the art of or the manner of. It can also be for speech. So like if that's why you say Kikongo or Kiswahili, because it's also a prefix for the speech of a given community. So Kimoyo is the art, the manner of adding life to life, because moyo itself means life and spirit. And this is why we substituted for the concept of African spirituality. So instead of African spirituality, we say kimoyo. And then, from this foundation, we're able to articulate and understand various different concepts. So as if you understand kimoyo, if you go back and understand what is being conveyed by this logograph here, then you'll be able to you will have the keys to unlocking the depths of African spiritual systems continent wide. And so we do this, and the reason why Africans have all of these signs and symbols is because of model thinking, and we got to start thinking in terms of models. And matter of fact, there's a course, and this is where I get this from here, because I do a whole other lecture on model thinking, but there's a course on Coursera. I don't know if it's still up, on model thinking. And so this comes from one of their slides. And it says, why models? Because we live in a complex world with diverse people, firms, and governments whose behaviors aggregate to produce novel, unexpected phenomena. We see political uprisings, market crashes, and never-ending array of social trends. How do we make sense of this? We make sense of this through models. And evidence shows that people who think with models consistently outperform those who don't. And moreover, people who think with lots of models outperform people who use only one. So when you're looking at the icon here, this is a model. And the reason why we're coming up with more models to represent these African concepts that falls under the umbrella of Kimoyo is because models allow people to consistently outperform others who don't. And you wonder why, for example, the ancient Egyptians for over 3,000 years were outperforming a lot of their counterparts in the area, because they thought in terms of models. And so why do models make us better thinkers? So the models that we're creating here today is to help to make us better thinkers. That's why it's called busongi, to excite, to provoke, and to stimulate thought. Models help us to better organize information, to make sense of that fire hose or hairball of data available on the internet, for example. Models improve our abilities to make accurate forecasts. They help us to make better decisions and adopt more effective strategies. They even can improve our ability to design institutions and procedures. And so this goes beyond simply coming up with a logo for African concepts. The ultimate goal is to provoke behavior and to develop institutions that will allow for us to outperform and to compete with everyone in the world. And so And so, are y'all hearing me? Can you hear me well? Testing, 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 testing. You said I'm coming in broken again. Let me see something. Just gonna make sure that I am. Sorry, folks. Trying to log in on this other computer. I'm back. He said I'm good now. All righty. So hopefully, even if you didn't hear me, I was just repeating what was on the screen. So so it may be because I'm on this Wi-Fi on this computer here, and so the Wi-Fi may be going out. And so it says I'm back now. So okay, cool beans. So thank you very much. Let me just log into this other computer here. I just want to make sure that if for some reason this goes out over here, that it doesn't how should I say, it doesn't end the show, because I fell out of the show. So I'm gonna log into my StreamYard over here. And so how y'all doing over there anyway in the chat while I allow access to the computer? So I'll turn you off, you off. I'll just put engineer. One day I'm gonna have a team of individuals. We need a studio. Who I want to make sure I hear clearly. You want to. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I do apologize for the inconvenience. And so, you know, normally everything works well, and you know, but you know, the individuals in the pseudos communities trying to put a curse on the broadcast to not get you this information. And so let me make sure that this is paused, and boom. All righty. So let's get back to making that more full screen. And so hopefully we are good here. All righty. All righty. So as I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted by technical difficulties. And I thank you, each and every one of you, for keeping me abreast on what's happening. So much love to each and every one of you. All righty. So models basically improve our lives, and they help us to better design institutions and processes. And so this is essentially the goal for all of the processes that we have in store here. And so I wanted to give an example of the purpose of the icons from an African perspective. And so I'll just give one example coming from the Dogon that we mentioned earlier. And so again, the pale fox is a much coveted text. And my copy is in Philly right now, but luckily I have very good notes. But anyway, so when the Dogon have like hundreds of signs, and when the elders were telling the authors of the text the purpose of the signs, what they were saying is that the signs, are the first stage of manifesting what the signs and symbols mean in reality. So they're kind of like the, what do you call it? The vision boards of African thought. And so the Dogon say to draw is to make something begin to be, thus marking the first step toward destruction, in terms of what has a beginning, of course, has an end. So they're talking in terms of cycles of things, but they all start with the signs. They all start with the symbols, the models that are discussed. And so they also say, finally, the graphic designs contain, or this is Griole and Giertling saying, finally, the graphic designs contain a teaching. So just like what we saw amongst the icon, all the signs and symbols have a proverb associated with it and an extended teaching. And so the signs of the things of the past teach the children. The signs of the things of the past, that is the road one follows. It is so that the children will take again, therefore remake the signs of the old things, the old customs that one draws them. The more signs a man possesses, the more learned he is. So what I'm doing here is just following in the tradition of our African ancestors in terms of the development and the redrawing, the reimagining of classical fundamental concepts and icons, and appropriating these fundamental philosophies to serve the people of today, the Africans, the Bayankole, especially here in America, but in the diaspora and in general. And so this is what we're doing here. And so this is a part of a tradition. And so the Kimoyo Cosmogram is a reimagining of this classic cosmogram from the Congo. And so this is my adaptation of the cosmogram that is presented in Dr. Fukiao's African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo. And so this symbol is called Dikinga. And it's ironic because this word Dikinga is actually cognate with the ancient Egyptian word ma'at. That's a different discussion. And matter of fact, I discussed this in Aluja Volume 2 on the etymology of the word ma'at. It's chapter 1, I believe. So after the introduction, chapter 1 is I give the proof of that argument that I just made. But what this symbol represents is essentially the cycle and the movement of the life principle. And so everything goes through a cycle of conception, of birth, of maturity, and eventually death and transformation. And so we can use this symbol to represent that concept for all areas of life, whether it be the life of a human being, the life of a civilization, the life of a business. We can all represent that life cycle using this cosmogram. And so what you see here in terms of these circles, they represent suns. And so the reason why it moves counterclockwise, remember those spirals that I showed, that I use in those representations that I created. All the spirals are going counterclockwise to mimic the movement of the sun. So this is the sun apparently below the earth, and of course we know that the earth revolves around the sun. But that's not the point here. The point is that the sun appears to be traveling over us in the sky and going under the earth and coming on the east of us and then settling in the west. And so this is what this symbol represents. It is used just as a way to teach cycles. And so, and V1, at stage V1 is conception, the son of conception. V2, the son of birth. And then you have the sun here at noontime. And then over here at 9 o'clock is the setting sun. And so the sun represents the human being. Each person is a living sun that is traversing on its path from conception to death to reconception. So in the African context, and especially among the Congo, they believe in reincarnation because, you know, the life principle cannot die. It can only manifest in other areas. And we'll get on that in the other icon that I showed at the beginning of the conversation. But that's a different video. So keep all of this in mind when we're talking about the Kimoyo symbol itself. So, but before we go there, we're going to talk about what initiation is in the context of the Bantu people, especially those who use the sun as a symbol in the traveling of the sun, just like you have in ancient Kemet, to represent life cycles and things of that nature. So the initiation is called Landa Ntangu, following the sun. And what I'm putting here is information from some unpublished works from Dr. Foucault. So I've been privileged to have a number of texts that have not been published. This is not, you know, this is the first time this is becoming public information. And so they will be published in the future. But the owner of the text now is just doing some legal work, and they have to be written because they're typed like in the old school typewriter, like, you know, so they have to be retyped, and especially because a lot of it is handwritten too. And so, but initiation, and so this is coming from a particular text, and he's talking about initiation. And so initiation is Landa Ntangu, following the sun. And this also, you know, at once represents what we talked about earlier in terms of the life cycles and understanding the fundamental demarcations and expectations of life, but also to follow an inganga, an expert, to be an intern, a student of a master. And so we're talking about a living tradition. And so Landa Ntangu, following the sun. And then you have a more expanded phrase, Dingo Dingo Dia Landa Ntangu, a process of following the sun in its apparent trajectory. So this is the full phrase of what initiation is for the people in the Congo. And in that process, which is called Dingo Dingo, and that's what we actually call. So when we're talking about the movement of the sun, that movement is called Dingo Dingo, which means a process, but it can also mean a system. So that process, that system, that systematic path in movement of following the sun, following the light, for all you Masons out there. This is the indigenous articulation of this concept. So now there's this other concept, and this is actually the name of one of his books. It's called Bulwa Meso, the power to see what others will not see. So initiation is a process of opening bulwa, or having open eyes, meso. And so it's the power to see what others will not see unless they what? Landa Inzila and Tangu. Follow the road. Inzila is a word for road of the sun. Follow the path of the sun. That's what we're saying in a different way up here. The dingo, dia, landa, and tangu. A process of following the sun in its apparent trajectory. And so Bulwa Meso, and those who speak Kikongo can actually pronounce this a lot better than me, of course. But this means having one's eyes open, being given the enlightenment that can transform completely any human being to what they call a sweet individual. That means a highly enlightened, civilized person, a bright living sun in and around the community. And so these are what we're doing. So when I'm talking about initiation, y'all being initiated, this is starting your initiation into Kimoyo. And in order for you to be fully initiated into the concept of Kimoyo, you have to follow the path of the sun. And we'll get deeper and deeper into what that means in the subsequent videos. But I wanted to put this on your mind right now. So this is a different way of articulating the path and the trajectory, the inzila. So this is what we call what we're going to call the inzila. So this curvature here of the infinity is the inzila. It is the path for which the intangu, the sun, you as the living sun, are moving. And you're moving in and out of these experiences of the double welded, the binary forces of nature. So in order to really get it, you kind of have to look at it sideways. So you can also convey the Kimoyo symbol sideways. So now you can see it more so along the lines of what we saw earlier. So this is the sun's path. So conception down here to birth, maturity, and then death. But we're going to do ours a little different because, you know, even though I'm using Kikongo words and Chiluba words, I'm combining common ideas and thoughts from various different African systems, from the Dagara to the Dogon to the Baluba to the Amazulu to the ancient Egyptian, and of course Kikongo, Chiluba, and even the collagen folks in the Luo and the Yoruba tradition. And so and I'm seeing Code Zulu says the language definitely is closely related to Zulu. It is. So Kimoyo can also be called Bumoyo. So Kimoyo and Bumoyo. Those are two different ways that you can say the same thing. And so in isiZulu, you would say Umoya for what is Moyo, which is a word for heart, spirit, and life in the isiZulu language. And in Chiluba, we say Moyo with a W after the M, Moyo. So, but the reason why we represented this, because this is the quote unquote ancestral or subatomic or quantum realm here. And it's the inverse of what happens here. So while we're going through the path this way in this world, in the upper world, in the lower world, we go in the exact opposite. And so we're living and existing in a different form or whatnot, preparing for our, so when it's death over here, is you're being reborn in its life this way. And so you're going through your birth, maturity, eldership, and death, and ready for transformation. So this connecting part here represents the point of transformation. The point, the Kalunga line, as they would say in the Congo, that you would switch from one state, an ancestral state, a quantum state, to this state in the upper world that we are more familiar with here. So this represents a cycle and a path going like this. And so when I looked at this, I also thought about, this looking like an old school hourglass. A lot of y'all may not, super young folks may not, had to tell time this way or count down, because since we got a lot of digital clocks. But back in the day, if you wanted to time something, you would use the hourglass and just flip it. It would be filled with sand. And so this also represents time and space. So our Kimoyo symbol represents time, space, universe, the universe in two fundamental states. In the where the plus sign is, it represents the world of matter. And then where the minus sign is, it represents the quantum world. Excuse me. As I take a drink. Anyway, so we're talking about space-time environment here. Now, when we talk about, positive and negative, in terms of binary representation, you got to understand that it is nothing inherent or fundamental about these concepts. All they represent is left and right on a timeline. So, for example, if these were numbers if these vertical lines represented time intervals or number intervals, they just represent any kind of interval, however you decide to do it. And so if you say negative or positive, all you're talking about is traveling on the line in a particular direction. So if I say if I say negative, all you're talking about is traveling on the left-hand side of the timeline. If I say positive, all you're talking about is traveling to the right-hand side. So if, for example, let's say this last line was the number 5. So this is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, right? So from 0 here, going to the right here for these intervals, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these will be positive numbers because they are to the right of 0. But if we're talking about going to the left of 0, you would represent that by negative numbers. And so this would be -1, -2, -3, -4, and into infinity. So all positive and negative means is right and left respectively. And so that's why you see on here where, because this also can represent a timeline. You're talking about positive and negative. You're just talking about right and left, directions and flow. So we're going to the right here in terms of the path of the sun, counterclockwise, but we're going left in terms of clockwise on this part. So we're representing these fundamental concepts of life, and we can have several discussions based on this symbol. And so remember, dingo dingo represents a process, but the word dingo dingo also represents a system. And so the actual name of this symbol is, I've called Bwenzedi. It's a Chiluba word, Bwenzedi. So it'll take some practice. So when you see this, this is the Bwenzedi sign, the Bwenzedi Busongi symbol. And so Bwenzedi comes from the root Inza, which means to do, to make, to act, to behave, to take place. And when you're talking about something taking place, you're talking about time, something that is happening in time. And then you know that you can't have time without space. So this is why this is a space-time symbol for us. And so, but that process, in the process of time, stuff is happening, stuff is being done, stuff is being made, things are acting and behaving in a certain way. There's no such thing as stillness or ultimate death. It is the life principle is constantly in motion, in and out of states of being, on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. And so this root here, Enza or Nza, is the root to fundamental representations or fundamental concepts that we can all incorporate here. So Chienzedi, a mathematical operation or an act. And so I'll show you in the subsequent lessons, initiatory lessons, how we can use this to represent, for example, a function. And how the inputs here produce the outputs here, representing two sets of fundamental existence. And so, you know, I thought long and hard. You know, the ancestors said, you know, and I won't even try to spook y'all out and say the ancestors gave me this vision, but, you know, the hell with it. I'm gonna spook y'all out. The ancestors gave me this vision. And when the deeper and deeper that I thought about this stuff, I'm like, wow, you can incorporate and teach so much just from these fundamental concepts here. And so that's what I'm doing. This is going to be my contribution to the forward flow of human history. And so and of course, again, that word Wenzedi, that this system, I mean, this word is going to be now attached to this symbol. It represents the word for system. So remember, dingo dingo means process or system. So when I'm talking about this system here, we're talking about, from the Chiluba language, we're going to borrow the word. I don't know if we're going to give it back, but we're going to borrow the word Wenzedi, system, from the Chiluba language. And so you also have Wenzelu, methodology. So now we can use this symbol to represent fundamental concepts and how to do research. Oh, it's going to get deep in the subsequent lessons. And then we have Winji, one who acts, one who manufactures. And then we have a variant of that, Ginza, or I forgot how you do it with the low tones. But that is an agent prefix on Inza. And that Mwinyi is Mu Inyi or Mu Inza. But when a Z is followed by I, it turns into the J or the Y sound. So, and then we can also represent, we can, even though that word Winyi is usually talking about a human being, we can refer this and say that this is a word for God, because it's one who acts. And anybody who has my book Aluja Volume 2, you'll see that I go through extensive pains to articulate the African concept that the words for God derives from words meaning to do, to make, to act. And so a Mwinyi or Mwinzi is one who acts, one who manufactures. And so the concept of a God is the action generating principle, the personification of the action generating. And remember this here, there's no death. There's always action. There's always movement. There's no absolute stillness anywhere. The only way something can be still is if it doesn't exist. And so this is existence. And what did we say earlier? That God is existence. And so when we're talking about Kimoyo, the first criteria has to be that in that African tradition, the word for God, or the God concept, has to be associated with existence itself. It has to be associated with the life principle. God is the action generating principle. It is life itself. It is existence itself. And so this represents God. It is a symbol for God in its totality. This will be equivalent to the Netcher symbol that you find in ancient Kemet, or the other, the Jikinga symbol that also represents God. There's, if you read Credo Mutwa's book, Indaba My Children, they have a symbol, or have a wood carving that is fundamentally the same as what we're having here, but it has like a face. It's like a canoe. I should have put that on here. I'll probably put that in a future lesson. It's an image of a canoe with a head on the left side and a head on the right side looking at each other. And it's the same fundamental concept of God. That's their representation of what God is. It's not God itself, the carving. We know that because African people aren't idiots. It is just a representation of a description of a characteristic of what God is. So now, when we talk about a system, what is a system? And these names that I have on here, because I have another lecture on model thinking, and this comes from my lecture on model thinking. And so when we're talking about a system, the author Rappaport states that a system is an entity which can maintain some organization in the face of change from within or without. Ryan states that a system is a set of objects or elements in interaction to achieve a specific goal. And so when we look at this, remember, these are all elements and things. They're all interaction. This looping that we have here is symbolic of the interaction of the forces on the left and the forces on the right that produce life. Remember, Kimoyo is the art of adding life to life. The goal is life. Life is the goal. Life is to manifest life abundantly in its infinite forms. That's what Kimoyo is. And so this symbol represents that concept. So the function, he continues, Ryan here, the function of any system is to convert or process energy, information, or materials into a product or outcome for use within the system or outside of the system, the environment, or both. Indeed, if a system is to survive, It must save some of the outcome or product to maintain the system. So let's go back to the symbol here. It's a recycling. And so we know that there's no death in the universe. Everything goes through its dingo dingo process. Is conceptualized, is born, matures, and dies, and is recycled. It goes into another state and reemerges as something else. And so in ancient Egypt, in Nigeria, in Cameroon, and even in Ghana, you will see these icons of a snake eating its tail. This is the same concept here of the snake eating its tail. If I can find someone who's a good drawer that can and transfer this digitally, they will, maybe we can get them to create this as a snake, biting its own tail. So this will be a representation of that concept. So as we say here, all systems have common elements and input. So remember that this is going to represent a function. This is a mathematical equation as well. So the inputs, outputs. That's what these represent. Inputs, outputs. A throughput or a process. So the dingo dingo is the process itself. The feedback, the interaction between. The reason why we can hear things or see things is because, for example, light is reflected off of an object and returns back to the eye, which translates signals or transfers signals to the brains that allows for us to interpret the phenomenon that is around us. Sound are waves, that propagate through the air, and those molecules hit our eardrum and vibrates the eardrum, and we have a hearing sensation. Same thing with language. All life is about the interaction between objects that provide feedback. So that's why you have feelings, and we have senses, and like touch, smell, sight. All of this gives us feedback about the environment that we're in. Our body vibrates and it gives us pain or joy, telling us what state that we are in. So, control the environment, and then they have a goal. All systems have a goal in mind. And as we will articulate in another lesson, the goal is life, the transference of life, the production and the sustenance of life. To transfer life from the source, to maintain it to an object's life cycle, and to give it back and put it back in the hands of the source to be recycled again so it can manifest itself as a particular type of entity. So that's what we're discussing here. And so I want to remind everyone of, from the African perspective, being I'm back. I'm back. For some reason, it's my internet connection on this computer, and hopefully y'all hear me. Let me know if y'all can hear me now. I'm okay. All right. All right. So this is why I have the other computer on right now, just in case this happened, so that we wouldn't lose the feed. So let me reshare my screen and get back to business and read from the current slide. All righty. So I thank y'all very much for rocking with me, and we will continue. So we won't let little technical difficulty stop us, and we will continue. So thank you very much. So yes, so he said your audio cut off after you said African perspective of being. And so, yeah, so the African perspective of being is dealing with motion. And so this is what Dr. Ramose is articulating here. And so I'll just read from the beginning, and I'll just read it straight through without speaking. So African philosophy is consistent with the philosophic position that motion is the principle of being. According to this understanding, the condition of being with regard to every entity means that to be is to be in the condition of ness. Whatever is perceived as a whole is always a wholeness, in a sense that it exists and persists towards that which it is yet to be, because this is to be characteristic of every existing entity. Being is to be understood always as a wholeness. And so what he's talking about essentially is being is part of a system that of cycles of going towards a goal of being, of transforming into different states and things. And so it's a very, very good article, and it's from a larger text on African philosophy. It's called the African Philosophy Reader, to be exact. And the editors are Coetzee and Rue at the bottom. So this came out in 2003. So I just wanted to emphasize here that motion is life, is being. And so that's why we represent that particular concept as being. And so actually that is the last slide. So I thank you all for joining me. And if you have any questions, you know, we can do a question and answer session right now. And so what you see on the screen is Bukanda, and that is my renaming of the African continent. And it is cognate with the word Kemet. And, you know, we're taking advantage of the whole Black Panther thing, but it's Bukanda, you know, in the correct sense. And so on my chapter of the etymology and the meaning of Kemet in Aluja Volume 2, you get the details of why I renamed Africa Bukanda. But with that being said, I know it's going to be a slight time delay. So again, I appreciate, you know, each and every one of you for joining the discussion. And if you have any questions or comments, now is the time to do it. So I'm gonna go, you know, for 20 minutes to 6 o'clock. And remember that we have another show at 7 o'clock where I will be interviewing the host of the podcast Comics Cube. And we're going to be talking about diversity in comics and the art of storytelling. And so if you are just joining us, you know, make sure that you indeed, and I will play it again. That is right. Make sure that you hit the like button and that you subscribe. I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. I think I'm just shy of 6,000 right now. So I don't know how many months, but my goal is by November, December to have 10,000 subscribers or more. So this will help out tremendously in getting these kinds of conversations out to the public in a very real and serious way. And so make sure that y'all do that. And let me see what's going on in the comment section. Peace. It says, and this is from Code Zulu. And well, first, thank you, Black American Zen. You are welcome. And so we will go now to the comment from Kozulu. Do you think secrecy still has a role to play in African initiation? Does it have any kind of benefit? Yes, it does. And they are, well, we got to remember it in the context of two things. So first, initiation helps you to obtain a certain amount of knowledge of how to run the society. Initiation is to teach you and to confer on you the responsibility of running and maintaining the society. So there are certain aspects of running a society that must be kept secret. So while, you know, we want open transparency in terms of our government, we should all understand, especially here in the United States, that we don't need to know all the details. We don't need to have an open, document for everyone to read, saying that we're going to invade or we're going to do this operation here, or that we've discovered this particular law of science and this will give us a competitive advantage with this, and this. You don't need to reveal everything. Only certain people who have been initiated, who understands the importance of secrecy and in understands the importance of the information that is being conveyed, need to have that information. People who have proven themselves to be responsible. So and make sure again that y'all are hitting those likes. And so there's enough of you. I need to see at least 20 or more likes right now, 30 or more likes. Make sure that y'all hit the like button. But anyway, so yeah, so there's that aspect of the secrecy. But then there's also, you got to understand that African initiations are essentially experiential. So certain secrets aren't not secrets as it is some real esoteric information. It's more so kept quiet because you need to go through the experience to fundamentally understand the teaching, because it's going to resonate with you in a different way if you go through it versus if I just tell you. So understand that what I'm designing and stuff today is also meant to be part of a rites of passage program for African Americans and people in the diaspora. But there are aspects of it that will be kept for the rites of passage, the initiation process, and then there's other aspects that will be kept public. And so we got to remember as well that those of us in the diaspora, we number in the millions. And so we're not going to be able to do and have the same effect that a traditional African initiation system would have, because those were meant to help in terms of small villages. And then given the nature of our experience here in the Americas or in Europe, we need to get this information out a lot faster. And so some stuff that may have been considered esoteric information in a traditional sense. We're going to have to make it more accessible so that more of us can gain access to it, and we can start utilizing this in our everyday lives to push us closer, into our ultimate goal of freedom and sovereignty. And so I hope I answered your question. And so Brother Hassan asks, no question but a comment. A highly philosophical lecture of familiar themes, but from an African perspective, which must be firstly digested before questions. Understood. And our good brother Robert gives a thumbs up. And let me see. Black American Zen says is currently reading Asante, Diop, Kamene, and others to re-educate myself, and have had an idea of creating children's books to visualize and make more accessible the perspective and history from the, and I guess there's a part two, from the Afrocentric perspective. Discovering you, I am seeing you're on the cutting edge and want to ask, how can I participate, help, and create in this ongoing project? Working on connecting Igbo, pre-colonial Igbo to Kemet and Nubia as well. And remember, this is an open thing. So this iconography, this symbol is our symbol. And so you can use it, but I just want to kind of control the narrative so that you can at least get the initial intent of its creation before you can, go out and use it and see fit the way that, will resonate to the people where you're at in your area. So that's why this is titled An Initiation into Kimoyo Iconography. And so what I'm doing is initiating you and giving you at least all of the details in which I can think of. And then from there, we collaborate. We just figure this out and see how we can utilize this in education. So for teachers, for people who have rites of passage programs and things of this nature, all of all of this can be incorporated. So, I'm not an island unto myself. This is a communal thing. So we're creating this for the community to use, and to y'all can use these symbols and create your own thing. So like right now, I've created t-shirts. It's just, I want y'all to, these shirts aren't going to make me rich. The profit margin is very small. So I'm not making money from these t-shirts. The point is that I would want you to get the t-shirt so you can promote the concept. You can redraw the whole thing yourself and make some pillowcases, make some other kind of clothing, make some head wraps, make some stickers to put on top of the computer. However, if you're an architect and you're designing a building and you want to put this icon on it, you can do the same thing. The point is to initiate you into what this means, so you know the fundamental scope and the boundaries in terms of what it conveys, and then for you to integrate it in your life as you see fit. If you are a sculptor, an artist, a painter, and want to utilize these symbols in that's what it's for. And so when you go to, like, I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on. Let me find it first. Nope, it's not that lecture. I'm gonna share my screen. Hopefully this is it. I want to show y'all what I mean by being able to use it, because the motifs have to be seen in various places. And so I think this is it here. All right, so remember that I did a a lecture on the African American Adinkra Project. And so let me go back to my screen here. Let me stop sharing there and reshare again the entire screen. So let me hide that. And let me start from this slide. So let me see, are y'all able to see that well? So this was the slide that we saw earlier of the Adinkra symbols amongst the Akan. And so they're used esoterically. They're used as a pedagogical tool to teach the values and philosophy and ethics of the community, but they're also used artistically. And so you see, for example, the clothing here, their signs, these Adinkras are part of the fashion, just the general fashion of the Akan. And so you even see folks getting tattoos of the symbols. So it's not they're imprinting the tattoos on themselves to show their commitment to the ideals in which the Adinkra symbols convey. So you even see them on buildings. So this is what I'm talking about. So everywhere you go in Ghana, you are reminded, you're provided the symbolisms and regarding how you, so, you know, this here, they're incorporating this symbol for God here. And this symbol, you know, over here conveying sharing and interdependence of the community. So all of these represent signs and values of the community. And so I think that was it as far as that slide is concerned. But yeah. So, you know, this is not meant to, it's not meant for me to just come up with these signs and symbols and then, you know, that's just like I'm hoarding it to myself and y'all can't use them. This is, I'm making these initial ones for you. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to be calling on our artists and our deep thinkers to come up with other symbols. That's the whole point of the African American Adinkra Project, to create other Busongi symbols for us that we can use in our everyday lives and that you can incorporate in your children's books and things of that nature. So he continues, what's on your essential reading list for people wanting to create Afrocentric content to bring more of our African Americans to this perspective? Ooh, you know, I did a show on my book list. So let me see what the name of that particular show was. I forgot the title of it, but watch that show on YouTube. And let me go to my channel and let me go to videos, because it wasn't that long ago. It was like asarimhotep's recommended reading list. And here it goes. Yeah, here it goes. It is I'll share my screen again. And this time we're just going to share the Chrome tab. Coming into conscious YouTube. Boom. So you see, so this is, if you go to my YouTube channel, look for this discussion. It was on the 7th of January. So this year at the beginning, it says open discussion, recommended book lists. And so this is my coming into consciousness reading guide. And I have the book list right here. So, I mean, you can watch the video, but if you don't want to watch it, because I'm giving you the list and I'm just telling you why. And And so, here it is. So I break it down using the very system that I talked about earlier. So this icon here, this Congo icon, I use that to represent the four quadrants, the four stages of the sun in development, and I mark them with 4 books inside each demarcation. So the Musoni, like, it's broken down into who am I. It asks these questions. So the book list is to help you to answer these 4 fundamental questions of life. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? And what must I do to fulfill that purpose? And so I recommend these books. Know Thyself, Dr. Naeem Akbar. The Psychology of Blacks, edited by Drs. Parham, Ajamu, and White. African Healing and Wisdom, Dr. Malidoma Some. My Life in Search of Africa. And I think that book I'm going to have to replace because I think it's hard to find. It's out of print. And people are trying to charge like $1,000 for this little thin book by Dr. John Henry Clark. And you could just go down the list. Where did I come from is the question. So Introduction into Black Studies, Dr. Malana Karenga. Africanisms in American Culture. I mentioned that book earlier, edited by Joseph Calloway. The History of Africa, Dr. Molefe Kiti Asante. Slave Testimony by John W. Blasingame. And the list goes on. So it's a total of 16 books that you can read in the course of like two years or so. You can do this in 1 year if you're a good fast reader. But I hope that makes sense. So what is this? Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen there. So I hope that answers your question. And Siri says, thank you, bro, for all your interviews and what you give. Love your interview on the comic book YouTube channel. I appreciate it. And again, the people who interviewed me are now being interviewed on my channel in an hour. So in exactly an hour, we're going to interview Brother Lamar and Dewey of the Comics Cube podcast. So make sure that y'all come back for that. And and don't forget that if you want to support and you want to rep Kimoyo, and this is something that you feel resonates with you, purchase a t-shirt. And so all those different designs, those different variations of Kimoyo, a t-shirt, you can find a t-shirt for it. If you want to represent, as an African American, your ethnicity, this is my suggested name for our ethnic group, African Americans, the Bankole. And so let me go back to the comments. It says, wait, first I'll go here. Thank you again. The access is appreciated. You're welcome. And Sari says Zulu Shaman by Creative Mutar was a good book as well. And of course, we can always extend. But that book list that I made was just a recommendation for those who are just coming into consciousness. And so I'm not recommending no Diop, Civilization of Barbarism. That's too deep. They have to have a foundation first. And so promoting good ones that already exist or ones that are already trying to get off the ground would be hot too, like the pack or the comic depicting the nature as children coming up. Exactly. It's so much potential that we can do with this. And so lastly, this is amazing. Is there more information on your theory of modeling and its benefits to education? Yes, I did a whole lecture on modeling. And again, there's a course that you can take on Coursera. And the author has a book, on that as well. And so, we can talk, offline about that. So I do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for your questions and your comments. And again, we'll be doing more of these, but those will be for our Patreon members. So if you have not joined the Patreon page, you know, you can join at patreon.com/asarimhotep, and you be helping support this channel and the development of the upcoming documentary film, which we'll start shooting on next year when I move back to the East Coast. And any other way. So, you know, you can help by donating, or you can, you know, join the Patreon, and there are perks that come with that, like these exclusive lessons, exclusive interviews, and the like. And so, you know, one exclusive interview that is coming up is Dr. Modupe Oduyoye. So we're still trying to get the schedule right for him. So this brother is in his 80s and he's still traveling, and we're trying to get it right. And so, you know, this will be exclusive on Patreon soon. So I'll let y'all know more of when that is happening. So with that said, I appreciate you all, and I will see you all in an hour. So come back, get something to eat, use the bathroom, do what you got to do. But in the meantime, and in between time, see you on the other side. All right, peace.